Welcome to the Monday meeting. Today it's September 24th, 2018. We're really excited to have Barton Damer here with us to kind of do a live Q&A about just, I guess, the business of MoGraph, motion graphics, animation, however you would want to classify it. We've been doing these Monday meetings for a few weeks now, or I guess a month or so, 2 months. I'm not quite sure, but we've had a few guests come on and it's been great. We've been growing the audience a bit as well. So that's been a lot of fun to get some new people involved in these. But the goal of this is to have everyone join in. And if you're like a remote freelancer or someone that isn't in an office or is in an office but just wants to, chat with fellow motion graphics people. We do this every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern, depending on the presenter, if we have one, or if it's just a general discussion. So if you're watching this post this meeting, feel free to join in the future. We'd love to have you. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Barton, who can kind of give a little background on his background, I guess. And yeah, we've got some new things to share, and hopefully we'll have a great discussion today. So with that, I'll pass it over to Barton. And yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm the founding artist and owner of a studio called Already Been Chewed. Our website is alreadybeenchewed.tv. If you wanted to check that out. Let's see, what else? Anything else I should mention at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. You sent me a link to, you guys just developed a new reel?
Yeah, we did. We've been cranking out a lot of new work lately, and some of it we put into what I consider a work in progress reel. And I'm sure we'll be removing some clips and adding some clips in the next few weeks as we're allowed to reveal some more projects, things like that. But for now, yeah, it's just posted a brand new reel. Put it together initially for IBC Amsterdam last week, was able to show it off there. And then now it's live on our website today. Cool.
Well, I'll pull it up right here. You guys should be able to get the sound, but let's give this a watch, and then we can move on from there to some of the topics for today. Yo. Nice stuff, dude. Very nice.
I was going to say, yeah, we can give a little round of applause.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with our studio, we have 9 employees, 8 full-time, 1 part-time. So that's a collection of our team effort there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great work, and such a diverse uh, portfolio there too of the work.
Thanks. Yeah, that's one thing we've always tried to do is really diversify the industries that we work in. So while we've done a lot in action sports as well as sports entertainment and marketing, things like footwear, and we're also doing fashion industry as well as just all different types of product launches across different industries. So we've had a chance to work with Tiffany and Co. But then we're also working with some startups, helping them to launch different products, cameras and things like that.
Right on. Nice. Well, you've put together kind of a bullet list of some items that you thought would be good to discuss today. And the first one you had on there was about growing a team. Not sure if you want to kind of jump into that.
Yeah, so I started ABC a little over 8.5 years ago. And at that time, took the leap, went out on my own, which was a really scary step to do because I was the sole provider for a family of 5 mouths to feed. So quitting a full-time job that I actually really liked and really enjoyed was not an easy decision, and it was a super scary decision. So when I first went out on my own, I quickly discovered that I spent my days answering emails, doing estimates, dealing with revisions, things like that. And I almost felt like I owed it to my wife to explain to her, like, hey, I've been working all day long, but I have done no billable hours yet. And it's like 5 p.m. So tonight I'm gonna have to jump back on the computer around 9 and probably go till 2 in the morning. And so that was definitely the habit for the first many years of ABC. And I was fortunate enough that I was receiving some dream gigs, what I would consider dream gigs, and some recognition for the work that I was doing. And so once you kind of have those gigs and I guess that validation, then it frees you up, right? Because as an artist, a lot of times you just, I feel like as an artist, there's almost no in between. You're either really pumped on what you pulled off and you're feeling really good about yourself, or you just feel like trash and feel you're not worthy and can't hang with anybody else. And I mean, to be honest, that happens even to this day, even like having a studio. I'll look at some other studios and their work and I'll just be like, geez, like it's insane what these guys are pulling off. How can we compete? And then there's other moments where it's like, look at what we pulled off, but there's almost no in between. And that might be just kind of like the emotions of an artist, things like that. So all that to say, as a freelancer, I was, working by myself for probably the first 2.5 years. And I never really considered myself like a freelancer. Because before I went out on my own, I had been working for other people and other studios and things like that for over 14 years. So I had experience doing everything from graphic design, where I would literally design and lay out 100+ page catalogs. And during that 14 years, I had built websites. I had, branded companies and logo development, brand guidelines, that sort of thing. I had also done full 3D spots for national broadcast. So I felt like as a freelancer that I was just a one-man studio. I didn't feel as if I was a freelancer, and my target market was never other studios. So I wasn't out there trying to, go in on a day rate. I've actually, oddly enough, I've never gone into another studio and worked for another studio on a day rate.
Oh, wow.
I had worked remotely for Digital Kitchen for a little while, and I worked remotely with Troika for a little while, but was never in a freelancing situation where I found myself, working on a day rate in studio for another studio. And so a lot of my work was just coming direct, either direct from clients, direct from agencies, things like that. And so all that to say that having a family, the freelance life for me was I guess it was a drain in a way, in the sense that, like I mentioned, emailing people all day long, revisions, things like that. And then all of a sudden I'd done no billable hours. And so burning the midnight oil was like a regular thing for probably 8 years of my life at that point. And just not neglecting the family, but neglecting sleep. And so I started asking myself the question, okay, I've got some of the validation that as an artist I felt like I needed in order to feel like I was good enough, and so now that I have that, it was like, okay, what could I do as part of a team? Because this could be much bigger than myself, and it's going to be a lot more sustainable if there's more than just me here. Because one of the things I was running into as a freelancer is, you book a project and you think that project is going to be done on, say, Friday. And you communicate very well with the client and you let them know, hey, Monday I'm no longer available, so we need to make sure we get all your revisions in this week before the following week arrives. So what happens is Friday comes, they're not done. But you can't just drop them and ditch them and be like, sorry, I told you I need to be done. Monday I have to start this other project for this other client, right? You could do that, but you could also not have any repeat business, right?
Right.
The next thing you know, I'm juggling the project that didn't finish on Friday. I'm also juggling the project that started on Monday. And I was already burning the midnight oil anyway. So now it gets really stressful,
Right.
And so that's where I really wanted to look and see, like, okay, I can't continue at this pace for 10, 15, 20 years. That's not sustainable. What can I do with a team, either directing a team or building a team to complement my strengths, and looking at, okay, I know what I'm good at. How can I hire other people that are good at things that I'm not good at, so that together we can do something that's much bigger than myself? And so that was a lot of my motivation. And honestly, some of it came from having a family, because it becomes challenging, to have family time if you don't have a team to rely on. And so once I had that team in place and started slowly building it, it became a lot easier to juggle things and shift the schedule around, so that when that Friday rolled around and that client's not done, there were 2 of us or 3 of us, or now there's 9 of us, and we can juggle it all together.
Now, when you started kind of pulling in some employees, or I don't know if they're employees or if it was a project by project basis, were you actively searching for like freelancers to come help on, a project, or were you looking for an actual employee?
So I started with what I have available to me at the time, because it's really hard to get somebody who doesn't know you to just take a job with you and work out of your house, right?
Right.
So I think what you've got to understand when you're trying to build a team is you have to be patient for a number of reasons. So my very first hire was actually somebody that had just gotten their degree in marketing and had no job experience whatsoever. And so it was a friend of mine, and we just kind of were honest with each other and said, okay, look, you can't get a job without experience, and you can't get experience without a job. So, and what I need right now is I need somebody to try and help me free me up into more billable hours. Because if I can turn it into more billable hours and less emails, that's a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal was to turn myself into more billable hours and less phone calls, less emails, things like that.
And was that answering client emails, but also like trying to find new business as well?
No, it was less about finding new business and more about, I guess, project management and being almost like a buffer between myself and the client.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also noticed too that if I'm working till 3 a.m. and then the client wants to give me a revision at 8 a.m, I'm kind of cranky and I don't take those revisions very well. But if I could get somebody to jump on the phone for me or with me and take those revisions, they don't have to promise to do them or not do them. They just have to basically take notes and say, sure, I'll meet with Bart today when he has time, and we'll make sure that we can pull all this off for you. It just made for a better client experience. And so it was about trying to make the client experience better, because I recognized that I was tired and cranky and I was emotionally attached to the project.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had worked till 2 a.m. on it. And so, you want to put your fist through the wall sometimes when you get those revisions. So all that being said, so my first hire, I just said to them, come work with me. If it doesn't work out, go work at some of the agencies that I'm dealing with and send me a bunch of work. Don't feel like you have to stay here. I'm not going to be offended if you don't, but you need experience, and I don't even know if this is going to work, right?
Totally.
So the tricky part about that, though, is now I've hired somebody and I have to train them, because the college degree is cute, but it's not necessarily going to tell that person how to help me.
Right.
So that could be a really tough situation, right? Because you hire this person, you're cranky from being up till 2 a.m, and you feel like this person is in the way. And it's not their fault, it's your fault, because you're the one that hired them. So now you have to figure out how to be patient, how to train that person to help you. Because otherwise it's just going to be a disaster. You're going to have expectations. You're going to feel like they're not helping you. But the reality is you have to be able to communicate, how can I be helped? What can this person do today, each week, throughout the month, in order to help me?
Yeah, you have to learn how to delegate, right?
Yeah, so that's how we started. And so, I trained that person to start doing project management. And then as we grew, essentially what we did was I would start all of the projects, right? So look development, do a test animation, get all of that approved by the client. And then once that project was kind of, going down a steady path, that's when we would outsource and use freelancers to kind of finish the rest of the project. And I would jump on to the next project. And so that allowed us to take on a lot more work once we got to a place where that person could help me in the project management of things. And so at that point, I quickly became kind of in the pipeline creative director, where I'm starting things and then getting, freelancers to help complete them. And so over time we were we were turning down a lot of projects, and we decided to keep a log of every single project we turned down. Why did we turn it down? So for example, there would be projects where a client would hit us up, they had $20,000, but they wanted $60,000 worth of work done. So we didn't really count that as like, hey, we need to hire somebody at that point. Because that project sucked anyway. Even though it was tough to turn down 20 grand, it was like they wanted the world created for it, you know, and it required a lot more budget. So, so we kept a log, and some of them were dream gigs. You know, it's like, shoot, we can't take this on because it's humanly impossible to take this on. So we kept a log, and after a year, went back in and realized that we had, you know, turned down or rejected anywhere between $200,000 and $300,000 worth of work that we wished we could have taken on. And that did not include the projects that didn't have enough money, you know? So we're only logging the things that it's like, man, had we had somebody else, we could have said yes to this. So that's kind of where it began. And then that was like the huge decision to like move out of the house. Cause at that point, I had renovated a spare bedroom in my house, so that my friend could feel like he had a real job. So he would trip over toys, walk upstairs, and then we would shut the door. And I had renovated that bedroom to look like a downtown loft. In fact, if you've seen pictures of it, it looked like we were in the city and had this really amazing studio space. We even posted pictures online, and everybody, you know, thought we had this crazy studio space, which was pretty fun. But it was just a spare bedroom in my house. So the biggest decision though is like moving out of the house, in my opinion, because once you move out of the house, you're essentially doubling your expenses, right? So now you've got 2 electric bills, 2 water bills, 2 internet bills, you name it. You got an extra lease, which is basically another house mortgage. And so the big decision was, right, do I even want to do this, or do I just want to let my friend go work at an agency somewhere and I'll just remain a freelancer, because that's a huge step, a lot of extra expenses. So after we kept that log and realized how much work we were turning down, and that was not just random work, it was good work that I wished we could have taken on, it made sense to hire somebody and bring somebody on. So we ended up hiring another person, and that's when we moved out, renovated a studio space there. And that was also kind of like a big decision, in the sense that I've always known what I don't want ABC to be more than I know what I do want ABC to be. And for me, it was super important. Okay, if I got to move out of this really cool studio space that's in my house and be somewhere else, it has to be the right spot. Like, I don't want to just move in to like carpet and cubicles somewhere just because I need space. So I had to find the right space. And it was almost like, if I couldn't find the right space, I'm not growing. Like, that's how, I guess, childish I was about it. It was just like, okay, the right space has to be there. Otherwise, I don't want to work there. I got to want to work there. I got to want to be there late at night if I need to be there late at night. And if it means carpet and cubicles, I'll be a freelancer forever. I'm good, you know? So it was, you know, a lot of those decisions that had to be made, and then just wondering if it was going to be worth it to add all those expenses on.
Yeah, I mean, talking about growing a team too, like one of the notes you had mentioned here was that it's hard to grow if the founder feels like they're the best one on the team. So like, as you started to grow your team, like your second hire, was that someone to complement you? Was that someone that was better than you? Was that, you know, a generalist or someone who specialized in something?
Yeah, great question. So it is challenging, because looking back on it, thankfully it worked out, and thankfully we grew. And we are, where we are today, 8.5 years later. But looking back on it, I can see how it could be completely disastrous, right? Because you are, the freelancer, you are the artist that people are reaching out to because they saw your work in this feature, they saw your work in this tweet or whatever, Behance, name it, you name it. So I could see how it could be disastrous that if you bring team members on and you yourself can't handle not being the best one on the team, or feel like you have to be the best one on the team, you're going to suffocate everybody. And so that can definitely be a challenge of trying to figure out like when to pick and choose battles, when to allow other ideas in. And for me, I always had, I guess, the bigger picture in mind, as far as I wanted ABC to someday be between 8 to 12 people in size, because I felt like that was more sustainable and we'd be able to offer our clients more. So for instance, as a freelancer, in 2009, I won Digital Artist of the Year. And while that was fantastic and kind of an ego boost, it also terrified me because I had seen and had been watching other digital artists from, say, like 2000, 2005 era, and wonder, like, where did they go? Where did they disappear to? Like, what are they even doing now? Do they have terrible jobs at some massive agency right now? Like, I don't even know what's happened to a lot of them. So I did not want that for myself, just kind of analyzing people through social media and the steps that, they were taking, or like the chess moves that they were making, and for me, it just seemed like a nightmare to like, okay, I'm hot right now, Nike wants me right now. Some other dream clients are hitting me up right now, but what about 2 years from now? Am I no longer like going to be the hot stuff? Am I going to have to reinvent myself literally every 2 to 3 years to stay relevant? And that just seemed like a really short-term strategy. Whereas if you could actually build a team and build a business, you're bringing in other people's strengths, and you are also creating something that can actually service clients versus like, hey, check out my really cool niche style that everyone's copying on Instagram right now, but I invented that style. Hopefully you know that, and so to me, it was more about having a mindset of, as I bring these people on, I want to empower them to be as good as they could possibly be. Now, obviously, I'm going to do directing and things like that to make sure a certain vibe is coming out of ABC and a certain style is coming out of ABC. But I don't want to know how to use Houdini. I don't have any plans of learning Houdini, I'm not very good at product modeling. I have no plans of ever modeling a shoe properly, and so you have to know what your strengths are, and then look for people that have other strengths outside of yours, so that you can actually start to offer your clients something new and different from year to year. So we've had some clients for all 8 years, ever since I started out as a freelancer. I started working with them when I was by myself. And imagine what it takes to be able to reinvent and rebrand those clients for 8 years straight. Yeah. So the way I see that is, rather than reinventing myself and my style, we're investing in computers, we're investing in equipment, we're investing in render engines, we're investing in people, and that allows us to year after year after year bring something fresh to our clients, rather than like, hey, remember when Bart did this really cool style back in 2009? Like, that was almost 10 years ago,
Right. No,
Um,
that's a great point of like to keep yourself fresh. You can surround yourself with people that are better and like can help you push, the what you can produce, which actually leads into like a great question that Kevin had about kind of the members of the ABC team. I don't know if Kevin wants to pop in and ask that, but go
Yeah,
ahead,
hi.
Kevin.
Um, I was wondering what roles the team members play, and if everyone is sort of a generalist, or if you have specific people for a part of your pipeline, and what that looks like.
cool. Yeah, great question. So initially, the first few hires were generalists, because we were just trying to increase and get more work done. But now, to a certain degree, I would say we're generalists, but everybody has their area of expertise. So for instance, I'm a generalist, but I would consider my area of expertise look development and design, and just making sure that the look of a spot has a certain lighting style, certain texturing style. So I would consider that my area of expertise, right? It doesn't mean that I can't or that I don't animate, but we have kind of designated roles and areas of expertise. So then Brian Talkish is our lead animator. So he's able to develop style boards, right? But at the same time, he is our lead animator, and that's kind of his strength is really interesting, complicated animations. And so he takes the role of like our lead animator. Then Thomas King is our lead modeler and technical director. So anytime we have a product that needs to be modeled, he would model, say, a watch, or a shoe or something like that. It doesn't mean that others of us on staff can't model. It just means that he's definitely the expert when it comes to modeling. He's using everything from ZBrush to 3D Coat to Cinema 4D, of course. And then Mark Fancher is kind of our visual effects lead. And so Mark is using Houdini. So he's doing a lot of our liquid, smoke, and fire simulations. But he's also doing lots of like intricate animations within Houdini. And so Mark, though, is also able to animate in Cinema 4D as well as composite in After Effects. So it's nice because we're not so specialized that I have like a Houdini guy just sitting around waiting to crank out some, crazy, simulations 6 times a year for me. But that he can actually be in the pipeline and help with animation or compositing on other projects. And then Lance is a motion graphics artist for us. And so he is more of a generalist. And then we also have Jordan, who is new to our team. He's a junior motion designer and is a generalist. Trying to think if I've left anybody out. Donnie is on our team. He's not an artist with us, but he is doing kind of like account direction and account development. So he is a lot of times being the buffer between us and clients as far as making sure that we don't sound cranky or pushing back on feedback too much. So he helps us a lot with that. And then Aaron is our head of production. And so we don't have a project manager anymore because I've really enjoyed keeping things lean and mean. So in that sense, everybody on staff is an artist and is billable hours at any given moment. So Aaron is a senior motion graphics artist, but he's very organized and loves spreadsheets. So he's our head of production. And so any given week, Aaron could be billable hours, I could be billable hours, and then of course all the other guys that I just mentioned could be billable hours. So we don't have layers of, say, executive producer, creative director, art director, project manager. All of those people are non-billable hours in a lot of other studios. And right now, with the 9 of us that we have, The ninth person being my wife, she works part-time from home, and she handles everything from like paychecks to health insurance. So that being said, we don't have layers and layers of like non-billable hours with the size that we are. So at any given moment, we could all be jumping in the pipeline and be billable hours.
Well, so I have a follow-up question. Everyone on your team, you've kind of said is an artist. So how are you guys getting new work? Is it all word of mouth, or do you have someone working on sales for you in your pipeline, or how does that come to be for you guys?
Yeah, it's both, right? So I think maybe to a certain degree, right place, right time back in the original days, because social media was new. And so at that time, a lot of the work that I was doing was going viral. I think it was easier to go viral back then because it was newer and people hadn't really seen a lot of digital art or motion graphics at the, I guess, quantity that we see it now. Now, you jump onto Instagram and it's just kind of like, everybody's good at this apparently, and so I think at the time that I was starting ABC, it was easier to, I guess, be seen and be known. So a lot of my work was being featured in magazines over in the UK, like Computer Arts Magazine, Advanced Photoshop Magazine, things like that. So we built off of, for sure, social media. And then, like I mentioned, just repeat work. So we have clients that have literally been with us for 8 years now. And some of that work is coming from a salesperson as well. So Donnie, who I mentioned, is doing sales. So he's on LinkedIn, Reddit. He does our Reddit feed for us. And he's just working on helping get our name out there through the interwebs, if you will. So that is super helpful. But I would say the large majority of our work is incoming work that's either people have seen us or referred other people to us.
There's a kind of a follow-up question to that, to the keeping clients since day one in the chat. Adam had a question of how do you keep up that relationship with these clients that you've had since the beginning, like so they come back to you every time?
This sounds obvious, but you just have to do great work for them, So obviously you want to do great work for them. You got to have a great attitude with them. And these clients wouldn't be coming back had I not taken money and invested it back in people, invested it back in equipment. And because we're constantly improving our services and what we can offer these clients, right? So I alluded to it earlier, but if I had stayed myself as a freelancer doing the same type of work that I was doing, almost 10 years ago when I won Digital Artist of the Year, I probably wouldn't have those clients still. And so it's constantly just investing back into the company, back into the people that are here, into the equipment, things like that. So for instance, I think the biggest shift for us as a company was probably 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, when we switched to Octane and GPU rendering and PCs. We'd be out of business if we were on Macs. I'm sorry. It's just, that's the way it is. Like we could not do what we do and be on Macs had we not switched 3 years ago. And that was a huge transition that changed the trajectory, because had we not switched over to that, we wouldn't have the power that we have right now. So we are literally like kids in a candy store right now when we look at the types of things that we can animate and render in-house. We've been doing a series of watches for DC Comics. And one of them was a Wonder Woman spot where the entire building is, on fire, shattering, bricks everywhere, dust everywhere. We rendered the whole thing in-house in, I think, 30 hours. We started it on a Friday night, done like a Sunday morning. We all came in Monday morning thinking that it was going to have 2 or 3 days left to render. And we looked at each other like, holy, this is crazy. Like, it was finished. Like, there's no way. And so the way that Cinema 4D keeps progressing and the way that the technology keeps progressing has really allowed us as artists to just get super excited, get behind it, and be like, okay, now what can we pull off? And so that's been huge for us to keep our clients interested, as well as gaining new clients,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
oh, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, Kevin actually had another question that he had submitted earlier that would transition perfectly for this. I don't know if, Kevin, you want to ask that one about pipeline.
Oh, right. I was going to say, I almost forget the way that I worded it, but I was wondering if you could kind of just run through, or generally speak, like when you have a project, what is the pipeline for that? Like, how do you guys start through concept into delivery? Like, what stages? And I know that's going to vary depending on the project, of course, but just generally speaking, if you have like an ideal, like we start here, we do this, then we move to this, and we do this before we do that. Like, what's your pipeline like?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically what we would do is start with, we have several phases. We have a concept phase, a style board phase, an animation phase, and then we also build in time for a render phase. And we just do that to really pad the project in case something goes wrong. So the concept phase is typically where I would be working with the client to figure out, okay, what is the concept going to be? This is everything from mood boards, inspiration, to a written format, sometimes a sketched format, describing, okay, here is what, the spot is going to do. So for instance, we're currently working on a spot with Disney for a Nixon watch that's releasing. So in that process, I had to pitch to Disney, okay, here's the general idea of the concept. Here's all of the mood and inspiration boards. We're going to draw inspiration from, this Jay-Z video to make Mickey relevant to today and things like that. And just started showing them all these things. They would give me feedback and say, okay, well, Mickey's not allowed to do this, so you have to change the concept because we're not allowed to have Mickey like fall and bite the dust on a skateboard, So they would give us feedback. Then we would figure it out and get that locked in with Disney as far as, okay, here's what the spot is allowed to do, and here's the flow of it. And then once that's approved, we would create what I call the concept board. So we might choose one style frame out of the video that can allow the client to see the direction of the spot and give approval on it. So it might be the hero image of the watch, or it might be another frame out of the video. So so we developed that concept board. It's fully rendered and to completion. So Thomas may have modeled the watch in order to develop that concept board. The other guys may have jumped into the scene and started creating buildings, scenes, fire hydrants, cars, Mickey's gloves, feet, etc. And then we send off that one concept board to the client, and we get approval for that one concept board. And when they're looking at that concept board, we want them to give us feedback on lighting, textures, composition, mood in general. And then we give them rounds of revisions to that concept phase. And so that concept phase can also sometimes include a test animation. So if it's a little more abstract, we may want to include a test animation just to kind of give them a sense to support the concept board that it's going with. And then once that's approved, we build off of the decisions that were made in the concept phase. And then we build off style frames that are, fully modeled, rendered, beautiful style boards for each and every key shot throughout the spot. based off of the concept that was approved by Disney in the concept phase. And then then we present the style boards to them, and they can give us feedback of like, okay, we don't like those buildings, we don't like those palm trees, you know, et cetera, revise this for each and every shot in the spot. Once those style boards are approved, then we move into the animation phase. And the animation phase is building off of the approvals of the style board phase. So for instance, if we get into the animation phase and the client wants to change lighting, texturing, shot lists, any of that stuff, it's like, okay, we can change it, but it's going to affect the timeline and the budget in order to make this change, because you already approved the concept, you approved the concept board, you approved the style boards, and right now we're in the animation phase, so we should only be getting approval on the way things animate, you know, Mickey's hands, things like that. We shouldn't be changing, you know, whether this is at sunset or at nighttime. Excuse me, let me get a water real quick. So then once those animations are approved, again, animations, I don't think I said this earlier, animations are done in low res. So we just crank our settings down inside of Redshift to be like really grainy, and it at least shows some of the lighting and the way the lighting goes. But we remind our client, like, refer back to the style boards that you approved. It'll be as beautiful as those style boards that you approved. And then once that low res animation is approved, then we go into our render phase where we're rendering. And we tell our client, you know, the render phase could be anywhere from 3 to 7 days, depending on the actual project itself, but we won't know that render time until we get style boards approved, and then we'll know how long each scene is going to take. The nice thing about that is, with the power that we have in-house, it's usually not taking 3 to 7 days, but we at least have built that into the schedule with the client, so that we have that there in case the renders need to be troubleshooted, optimized, you know, they're flickering, whatever could, you know, happen with renders. So we try to build that time in, and that's also a lot of times that's when the audio is being added, is during that time. While we'll have send it off and have audio added to the low res version.
So following up with that too, Pedro had asked a question, and he's at work and can't chime in himself, but how big of a role does post-production play in the animations? Do you prefer tweaking everything in C4D and Redshift and whatnot to get things looking really good, or do you prefer to spend time enhancing the sequence in After Effects?
Yeah, so when we made the switch about 3 years ago or so to Octane, one of the things that I think we were doing wrong was we were trying to add all of our old tricks that we used to do to try and make physical renderers look better. We were doing that in post to the Octane renders, and it just felt dated and it didn't look good. So we actually kind of did like almost like a mandate and said, okay, stop doing any post work in After Effects to Octane renders. Get it all straight out of Octane. Use camera imagers if you want to tweak the look with camera imagers. But we keep adding, you know, we keep exporting out passes, all these AOVs, and we keep doing the same tricks that we used to do to physical renderers to Octane renders. And it's basically taking our Octane renders and dumbing them down, because it just looks like all the post-process stuff that has a dated look to it. So after we switch to Octane, we do almost no post work on our renders. We do a little bit. We're experimenting with Fusion right now, mainly because Redshift doesn't have camera imagers like Octane. So there are some nice things, you know, to still explore and post inside of Fusion, but it's very minimal. For the most part, our renders are 100%, you know, straight out of Cinema, straight out of Redshift. And, you know, After Effects, any compositing is, you know, clips together, transitions, things like that, but not necessarily adding glows or layers of AOB set to overlay or multiply or anything like that. That's typically not part of our workflow anymore.
And then Matt, you had a follow-up too, if you want to ask it. I see that you're actually at home.
Oops.
Yeah,
There you go.
about the render time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to see render time wise, how you build that. Do you roll that into another phase, or do you actually build that as a separate phase for them? Because I always have trouble explaining that to a client.
So the way I explain rendering to clients is it's very similar to the print world, and everybody can relate to the print world. So once they approve like a PDF for a brochure, it has to be sent off to a printer, right?
Mm.
And so everything has to be approved before we go into high res. Because once it comes back as a high res render, it's the same as getting it back from a printer. So any errors that we made will correct and, you know, reprint it, so to speak. But if there's no errors and they want to make changes after the high res has been delivered, that's going to affect timeline and budget. And so they just have to be educated that you're looking at the high res style boards, you're looking at the low res, you know, redshift settings. And when you get it back, it's going to be as beautiful as the style boards. And so there shouldn't be any changes at that point. If there are, we're going to have to address the timeline and the budget. Now, not all projects have to have that built in. There's some projects that are pretty easy to just render overnight and come back in and provide them high res renders during the animation phase. But we keep, you know, trying to push ourselves and push what we're capable of as far as polygons and animation and things like that. So much of what we're doing these days does require that render phase at the end of the project.
Cool.
And that render phase, you know, it doesn't matter to the client. That render phase could be in-house or out-of-house. I just explain it to them that it's similar to sending it off to a printer. Like once it comes back from the printer, you don't make changes without having to send it back to the printer again.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Do you have like a flat rate that you charge them, or is it based on how complex the scene is, or how do you pass that on to the client?
You know, it's really tough because of the processing power. You know, some scenes we'll use, we got away from using render farms because I think I invested like 10 grand in render farms over the course of like a month or two, a couple years ago. And it was just with some of the scenes that we were doing. The render farms are great when you've got a smaller scene and it's like, you know, 50 cents to $1 a frame. But we were getting to a point where some of these render farms were charging us $7, $8 a frame or more in order to put enough power behind it. So we did everything, you know, we started converting everything internally, because if I spend 10 grand on render farms, that's what, 3 Voltas that I could have internally. And I have the Voltas forever. So that's where we shifted our focus from there. I think I got away from your question though. Sorry, what were you asking again?
Oh, just like how do you pass the cost on to the client? Like, are you doing like a flat rate per project or like per frame? You're talking about breaking it down that way.
I'm doing a flat rate. It's not scientific, and you know, it's definitely not. So I'm typically just telling the client that if we do have to re-render after the high res is provided, it could be anywhere from $1 to $2 a frame, depending on how complex the scene is.
Gotcha. Cool.
So we've had a few other questions submitted before this through the Monday meeting channel. That a lot of stuff that kind of deals with freelancing and, you know, if you guys hire freelancers, and if so, kind of, you know, how you find that talent. Do you scout? Is it word of mouth, networking? Benjamin Allenson had submitted a question, but I don't think he's on right now. Do you post stuff online? And maybe you could discuss that if you do work with freelancers. Yes,
we do work with freelancers. I typically we're working with freelancers as a necessary evil, and I don't mean that to sound as bad as it sounds, but if you think back to even in the early days when I said I would basically start a project and then get it going and then be able to pass it off once a lot of the approvals had happened. That's typically how we would work with freelancers now as well, is basically like, okay, this other project came in, this project is kind of like, approved and on its way, and we're just slammed right now. Let's see if we can find a freelancer to basically finish out what we've already started. So a lot of times that's how we're using freelancers. Every once in a while, like we might hire a freelancer, like a character animator. For instance, like we could do character animation in-house, but it's timely, and I don't think we're probably like as fast and efficient at character animation. So we do minimal character animations, not a problem whatsoever. But there might be certain specialties that we do need to freelance here and there. But for the most part, as I'm approaching, say, a client and pitching ideas to them, excuse me, I'm fighting a sinus cold here. But as I'm approaching a client and pitching ideas to them for the creative, I want to be able to pitch what I know that we can pull off as a team. And I'm always considering like, okay, I know Brian's really good at this. I know Thomas is super good at this. I know Fancher's super good at this, et cetera, et cetera. Just kind of going through the list of what we're capable of, what have we done as a team in the past, and what's going to push us to another level as a team this time. Did you lose me?
Oh, you're back now. But your audio was perfect, but your video dropped out for a second, so that's fine. It's all right.
Okay. So I'm always looking at like, okay, as a team, here's what we've pulled off in the past. Where do we want to go to challenge ourselves as a team in the future? And just always looking at like, okay, here's what we can accomplish together. So that's kind of how I view our team. And so there are business models, I suppose, where the owners are developing creative and then they scramble and go find freelancers that can pull it off. But to me, it's definitely about like, here's what we can do. And I'm not going to pitch something to the client that we can't do. And then just like hope that there's a freelancer that has the same schedule availability to do something that we can't do. I want anything that we do, anything that we're posting, to be things that we can pull off together.
And yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you're at the mercy of others' schedules and time and all that. So doing what you can in-house.
It'd be a nightmare. I mean, we literally have clients that will work with us for 3 or 4 weeks on a project. The project is supposed to be done after that 4th week. Client feedback delays, and 3-4 months later, we're still working on the same project. Like, I can't even imagine trying to run a business model where I've got to go find another Houdini artist to pick up where the first Houdini artist left off because the original Houdini artist is no longer available. Like that seems really stressful.
Well, and following up with that, Matt had another question just in terms of, freelancing. I don't know if you want to ask that, Matt.
Sure. And I guess you guys don't work with freelancers, but as a freelancer, what would you say might help, like me personally or any freelancer stand out? Because, there's a ton of us out there. We all do some similar things. What would you say would maybe help you stand out?
It might sound so simple, but communication. Like, it's amazing how simple it is to communicate well, communicate on time. It is beyond stressful to work with a freelancer and wonder if they're going to hit the deadlines, or wonder where their progress is, you know? So being reliable is huge, you know, like there's super talented people. And then if we work with them, it's just so stressful wondering like, are they going to hit the deadline? Where are they on this project? Why haven't I heard from them in 2 days? You know, and so excellent communication skills is huge, because that's, you know, if we've, it's all about trust, right? Because we got to trust that the work's going to be good. We got to trust that it's going to be correct. You know, the little things, as far as following instructions, being able to be super creative within a creative brief, you know, bring to the table what you can bring to the table, but not bring something to the table that's basically like, here's why your creative brief sucks, and here's why you should go with this idea that I came up with and you paid me for the last 48 hours. You know? So I think little things like that are definitely what's going to develop like the trust and the callback.
Nice. Just going through some of the other questions.
There's some good
Pedro
ones in the
actually.
chat. Do you want me to call out some of the ones from the chat, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask this last one that Pedro had submitted that kind of might go along with this. But when you either hire a freelancer or an artist to come in-house, do you like that artist to be more about, you know, have like a very good design sense and maybe lack in like the technical, or vice versa, like a very good technical artist that you can then direct with design?
Yeah, I think that goes with hiring too, like when you're looking for somebody.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of where our areas of expertise, I guess, have been called out and figured out, is that, you know, sometimes it's totally fine if you're not great with animation, as long as you're great at something, right? So you could be really good at look development, but you're not great with animation. Or you could be really good with animation, but you're a terrible designer and your look development's not very good. So you definitely have to have a strength. You can't just be average at everything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That there's a difference. Like a generalist doesn't suck at everything, you know? A generalist is typically good at everything, you know? But there might be within that generalization something that you're actually really good at, or something that you could focus on being really good at, you know? So I don't expect or need freelancers and or employees to be amazing at every aspect of motion design. There's too much to learn, right? But if we can figure out, okay, they're not so great at lighting, but they are really good with building these 3D scenes. So then we just know moving forward, okay, let's have this guy build out the 3D scene, and then let's have this other person who's really good at look development take that final scene and put the final polishing touches on it.
Mm. Cool.
And just figure out what the strengths are and only try to use people's strengths and not worry about their weaknesses too much.
Nice. Yeah. Liam, if there's some other questions popping up in the chat, feel free to.
Sure. Yeah. So I see Adam's in the chat, but I think he's muted because he's at work. So this is going to be kind of a weird question. Are you happy with what you're doing at this point? So Adam's asking, are you happy? Do you like the work that you're working on and getting the results that you're getting? Do you feel like you have a good work-life balance, and how did you get to that point?
I'm real happy with where we are as a studio. You know, again, back to making the decision of whether or not to move out of the house or not. It's a big decision, because you are asking yourself the question, is it even worth it, right? Like all these added expenses, all the extra stress. People management is not fun. It's not easy. It's probably the most stressful thing that I do. And I'm fortunate because we have a very good, very low drama team, and that's on purpose, because I don't want to have to manage personalities a ton if it doesn't require it. So we got kind of like a no drama rule around the studio here for that reason. And so we are 8.5 years old. I can honestly say that for the past 2 years or so, it's the best spot we've been as a company as far as health and work-life balance. But there were definitely times in the first 5 years of the company where I did ask myself, why am I even doing this? I should probably just be like an amazing freelancer and forget all this other stuff. But I think to get to it, you have to go through it. And so thankfully we saw it made it through the other side. Right now, we're doing really well. Who knows? A year from now, 2 years from now, that might be a different answer. But yeah. I am super happy and thankful for where we are. And the work that we're doing is very exciting to me. Because like I said, I've always known what I don't want ABC to be. And so if ABC ever turns into cranking out explainer videos on the regular, I will shut it down and go work at Nike or somewhere else.
I guess too, Matt Milstead told us to ask you about the HOVR Havoc story.
Oh yeah. So that's, one of the things that's exciting about having a team is when you are a freelancer, juggling your schedule is really challenging, right? So like we mentioned earlier, project's supposed to be done on Friday. You're starting a new one on Monday. The project bleeds into the following week, and all of a sudden, you're burning the midnight oil and then some in order to juggle these projects. So having a team has freed that up quite a bit so that there can be some downtime amongst artists, but there's still plenty of billable hours happening. But it also allows you to pull things off that there's no way you could pull off by yourself, right? So this industry is really fast and really demanding. And we recently had a project for the Under Armour Hover Havoc. And it's actually one of my favorite shoe spots that we've done. And the thing that's crazy about it is we did the entire project, including revisions and all of the high-res renders, and we did it in 7 days with all of the full R&D to create the effect of the threads, the foam cushion displacing, and all of that whole project. We basically put everything aside, paused on all client projects, and then every single one of us jumped on the project for those 7 days straight and got it done. So that was a pretty crazy one.
So I just dropped the link in the chat for everyone to that project if you want to check it out.
Yeah, that's in the opening of the reel, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you guys watched the reel in the beginning, that little opening sequence there was from that project.
So that actually kind of transitions pretty well into one of the questions that Liam had about like general day-to-day. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Liam.
Yeah, I guess we can segue into that a bit. So you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but what is your general day-to-day like at this point? Because you sound like you're very hands-on. You're not like an owner that just goes out and pitches and sells. You're actually an artist still too. So
Yes.
Yeah, if you have a moment to tell us of like what like a normal Monday or a normal Tuesday looks like for you.
Yep. I'm actually going to walk and find my charger if you guys don't mind. I'm on like 3% battery.
Sure.
And we get a little tour of ABC as you're doing it too.
Yes, you do. Yeah, I'll do like a little background here. Here's everybody.
Nice.
So, excuse me. Sorry about this. This live video drains the battery fast.
I probably just dropped the video again, probably to save battery. There you go.
All right, is that better?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, I think one thing that separates you guys from a lot of studios is, similar to what Liam just asked, like you're still very much involved in these projects.
Yeah, sure. So my day-to-day, it honestly just varies, right? Because there's some days where I am in meetings with clients. Donnie and I always jump on the phone with clients. Aaron jumps on the phone here and there. We kind of have a rule around here that we don't want more than 2 people on the phone ever with a client. So, excuse me, Aaron, who's my head of production, he'll either jump on the phone with the client with Donnie, or I'll jump on the phone with the client. And that way we're keeping things efficient. Aaron and I are very rarely ever both on the phone together. Because we're not about that agency life. We're not going to throw like 9 of us on the phone with a client. It's not profitable. So my week is a little bit all over the place as far as I'll be, developing a concept with a client. I might get that concept, 70% fleshed out, and then we'll do a team meeting and say, okay, here's like the general direction for the spot. Now let's brainstorm together, like where can we take it from here? What can we do to make this concept better? And then I'll jump on the box, do look development, animation. I'll do some animation here and there, but because of my schedule, I'm definitely not able to like take on large portions of animation because of the time involved there. So similar to back in the beginning days, I'm usually heavily involved in the very beginning of a project. And then after we've gotten some things approved and gotten through the style boards, I'm kind of almost like stepping out and then allowing Aaron and Donnie to kind of wrap up the project as it gets revisions done. And that way I'm on to the next project, starting the creative for the next project, and then working with the guys to kick off the next project.
When you guys are kind of coming up with concepts and art direction for the spots, like how many treatments would you pitch, or like concepts?
Yeah, it totally depends on the client, their budget, and things like that. So it's all over the place.
Cool.
Kind of going off your answer there, do you guys not do free spec work pitches? Like, are you making sure that you're always paid for a pitch?
So we're never doing like free work as far as if a client were to contact us and say, hey, can you do this and then we'll see if we want to use you. That's never going to happen. But it's always smart that if you can do some things to help get the client to sign off on it, do it, right? So if the client is trying to figure out whether or not they want to spend, the money that they're about to spend, I'll definitely go ahead and say, hey, here's more info. Here's the concept I'm thinking. Here's a little test animation. And then all of a sudden you'll be amazed at how quickly they're like, oh yeah, this will be amazing. Send over the document, I'll sign it. So it's all a matter of perspective, right? If the client asks for something free to be done, it's immediately like, no way, not a chance, not doing spec work, right? But if I feel like doing something is going to help us land the project, then we go ahead and do it to help speed up the process of getting contracts signed. It's all in like perspective, right? At the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing, but it's who initiated it. If the client initiates it, you're almost like offended, right? But if you're the one that wants to land the project, you'll initiate it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a total difference.
Yeah, it's totally different. It's super offensive if the client expects you to do something for free. But you'd be dumb not to go ahead and throw some things towards the client to try and finalize and get them excited to sign a contract.
Yeah. Mark, I see you.
Are there any other questions popping up in the chat?
Yeah, there's a couple from Dan. Dan, if you want to hop in, you're muted at the moment.
Yeah, so I've been kind of battling for a while with, you don't see too many 55 plus designers. So what are kind of the skill differences between being a designer versus going the creative director route? And I mean, do you think you can be a designer, like now that everything has been changing over the last 10 years, do you think people are still going to be designers making the things when they're like reaching retirement? Or do you think they should try to shift their careers more towards creative direction eventually?
That's a really good question. I don't think being a creative director is for everybody. That's for sure. It's definitely a different skill set in many ways, which is why in larger like agencies and things like that, a lot of times your creative directors can't do what you do. You know what I mean? And it's typically because the creative director is an artistic person and has a vision for a project, but they're also a people and a budgeting person. And so if you're an amazing artist and you're super good at animations, or you're writing espresso, or you're dealing with any kind of like super complicated things that I would say don't feel the pressure to go that route at all. Yeah, I wouldn't feel that pressure. I think the main reason you don't see people at like say 55 years old doing the work is because this industry is terrible on people and burns them out. And so I've really tried to create an environment here that is super family friendly. So, I have 3 kids myself, I'm married. And my strategy, I'll just put this out here, is after LA and New York chew up and spit out people by the time they're 30 years old, I want them. I want to offer them a mansion in Texas where they can come do amazing work and not have to be burnt out. So I'm very concerned about what you brought up, and I don't think it has to be that way.
There you go. There's a calling card for some people.
Right.
Good opportunity. Just coming through here.
Yeah, I'm coming through the chat now too.
So I think we're starting to kind of wrap up here. One question that Kevin had asked would be, what do you wish ABC could do that it doesn't? And, also the inverse of that.
Yeah. I think for us, it's always pushing ourselves as artists and, looking for solutions for clients as well. So it's balancing those two. So we definitely don't want to be doing the exact same thing we're doing now 5 years from now. So technology is going to change that. We'll be bored if we're doing the exact same thing. And so I think it's always going to be pushing ourselves creatively in ways that will also help our clients either launch products or build brands. And so we'll continue to do that. And I don't think the medium matters, like things used to be print, then they switched to digital. We've done some VR here and there. For us, it hasn't been a huge request. I'm quite sure we'll be doing some AR at some point. And, I just think whatever the medium is, we're the ones developing the creative content, and we want to come up with really creative ideas. And the medium doesn't matter at all. Like the medium's going to change, and that's just new opportunities for us to do new and interesting things.
Now, talking about new and interesting things, and I know you guys have just been churning out a ton of work. Do you guys have any personal projects that you guys work on the side ever, or are you just like we're constantly doing client work?
No, in fact, I historically try to make it a goal to get paid for personal projects. It's just more profitable that way. And so what I mean by that is, like, anytime we get client projects, they don't have to always be, shoe spots or watch spots for Star Wars or DC Comics, but just looking for ways that, okay, I am doing an explainer video, but how can I do this explainer video in a way that it can hit my motion reel, or in a way that challenges me as an artist to do something different on this particular client project and make it as good as I can possibly make it. And then the client is going to be the one that has to dumb it down. But for me, if it's an explainer video, I can still crush it, come up with something amazing that I'll be proud of, and hopefully make it into my motion reel. And that's just kind of how we approach all these projects. And so I really have never had a habit of doing personal projects. I try to learn and get paid to learn while we're experimenting for these other brands.
Awesome. Well, I think unless there's another question in the chat, Liam, I think we've kind of made it through all the submitted questions.
Yeah, I think so. Most of the questions that came in kind of got through osmosis, so it worked out really well.
Cool. Well, we can't thank you enough, Barton, for hopping on this and hanging out with us for a bit. And for those people who don't know, this whole Monday meeting thing has started more or less from Barton and the Grayscale interview you guys did together, just talking about getting the team together and sharing inspiration and talking through different business items that might come up and whatnot. So much appreciated for putting that out there and spawning this for a lot of us remote freelancers. So
yeah, of course.
Much appreciated there. And we'll definitely have to have you on again sometime soon. And you guys are absolutely crushing the game right now. All the work is just super, super good. It's high level stuff. So very inspiring for us. And without a doubt, there's always like one or two ABC spots that gets mentioned in these meetings, and we talk about them. So
yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedule to do it. So we will wrap up. We'll have this probably posted up online sometime in the next few days for people who missed out on it. Tons of good information on here. But we will be doing another Monday meeting next Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be sharing the link a few minutes before that one goes live. It's not the best process we know, but using this Zoom service, it's tough to generate like custom links and whatnot. So anyway, enough of a rant there, but thanks all for joining and have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Thanks.
Brograph.com, an online resource for learning Cinema 4D, After Effects, and other motion graphics tools specifically catered to help you prevail as a motion graphic designer.
What's up, bros? Welcome to another Brograph motion graphics tutorial.
With tutorials, plugins, and now a podcast with tens of thousands of listeners worldwide.
Yeah, it's a great community to be part of.
We give you professional time-saving tips, industry news, interviews, shortcuts, and lessons that help keep you current in the world of motion design.
Join the HDR studio, take the render settings, pick the HDR, put in a reflection, and gorgeous.
I love projects that scare me. When our art director comes to us and asks for something that I had never done before, man, it gets me pumped.
Our weekly long-form podcast will give you the latest news, help you in your file management, hardware configuration, and client relations. Learn about the latest render engines, modeling techniques, and workflow integration while staying entertained.
Real nice banana.
Ah, that's so funny. All right. I'm going to live forever.
Our Brograph Talks are a chance to see the way industry leaders from around the globe are changing the face of motion design.
Sometimes you got to make stuff that you're not going to put on your reel, and I'm not here to judge.
The podcasts and talks include people like Beeple, Barton Damer, Nick Campbell, Andrew Kramer, David Ariev, Chad Ashley, Paul Babb, EJ Hassenfrost, Mitch Myers, Chris Schmidt, Jules Urbach, Cornelius Dammert, David Brodeur, Andy Needham, Caitlin Kaju, Zubair Parker, Noseman, Ryan Bean, Casey Hupke, Nick Lyons, Sage, Joey Korenman, Jeremy Cox, Rick Barrett, John Dickinson, Matthias Omatola, Patrick Goski, Brandon Clements, Steve Teeple, Tom Glimpse, Patrick Longstrom, Julia Simone, Devin Coe, Al Heck, and even Deadmau5.
You get that render done. Yeah, you better frame what?
Our Brograph breakdowns go behind the projects and give you an insight on what it's like to manage and maintain your own personal business or work for a large company. Join us for live sessions, check out our useful plugins, watch time-lapse projects, interact with us, and send us email questions and topic ideas. Or just hit the Rando Render button and do an imaginative daily that'll keep you on your toes.
Take all your dreams and let's do it!
Subscribe today and get automatic updates on the latest tutorials, tricks, tips, and inspiration brought to you by industry professionals Dave Koss and Matt Milstead.
We don't care how you get here, folks. Just get here.
Subscribe now to Brograph Tutorials. It's pretty good, I guess.